Hello and welcome everybody to the Westside Sports Podcast. This is a very, very special podcast edition today. As always, I am your host, Dakota Esri. Joining me today is one only Jacson Bevens, the host of the Cigar Thoughts podcast. Jackson, thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon, man. How is your day going?
It's been great, man. I've been looking forward to this. Thank you so much for reaching out. Always love the opportunity to talk ball. It's been a busy day, but busy is good. So yeah, very happy to be here.
Yeah, dude, I saw that you had Brock Ewart on earlier, and I can't wait to
Yeah,
listen and tune you guys in and give you and Mike Barwin a shout out. You guys do some incredible work, man. All the hosts, Mike Golick, Diana, all the people you guys have had on. It's been a huge, that's kind of how I kind of got started, was listening to your show. And it kind of motivated me to get off the proverbial snide and make my own show. So this is just kind of a dream I'm living out today. But dude, we can't start off anything more than the combine. This
yeah,
combine we just watched, there's a lot of guys that came in and were eyebrow raisers, and there were some guys that definitely their stock slid. So what are some of the people you watched, people that got your eyes raised, and some of the takeaways you had to begin the overall conversation?
yeah. From like just a pure fan standpoint, like not talking necessarily from a Seahawks standpoint, but a fantasy degenerate and an overall NFL fan. You get to the skill position guys, and that's such a fireworks show. And this running back class, especially, I think was just tremendous. I think it's probably been since at least 2017 since we've seen a class like this, at that position. And that was the class that had, who all was in that? Fournette and Kamara and Dalvin Cook. And I'm forgetting at least a couple others that had long careers. And, this really feels like it could be that this year. And I think it speaks to, the cyclical nature of the NFL, and we're starting to see the rise of the running game come back and the value of a really good running back come back. And it's part of it is just because if the pendulum moves too far one way, it's bound to swing back the other way. And when passing really got out of control about 2020 through 2022, we saw this, inundation of Vic Fangio, too high shell coverage safeties, and a lot of people talk about that aspect of it when it comes to modern NFL defenses and how it's taking away the downfield pass, and we're not seeing quite the explosive passing numbers that we were seeing 5 years ago. But what it's also done is it's gotten the third linebacker off the field. Everyone's running nickel as their base now. And the off-ball linebackers that are on the field are like 20 pounds lighter. Well, you know what you do when all of a sudden there's 300 fewer pounds on the defensive side of the ball than there used to be? You fucking run at them. And that's
Yeah.
what we're seeing. And that's what we saw a lot of the playoff teams and the teams that had deep playoff runs do last year. So I'm super, super excited to see which of those guys, where they end up, and where, which teams. I don't think a great running back takes you from being a bad team to a good team, but I do think a good running back takes you from a good team to a great team. And I think we saw that with Baltimore and Houston to a large degree with Joe Mixon, obviously Philadelphia with Saquon, and Detroit. Everyone thought they were crazy taking Jahmyr Gibbs high in the first round, but he's the type of player that could put you over the top. So that was my favorite part. As far as what I'm looking for Seattle, I mean, I'm like everyone else, man. This is a deep draft at the line position, and it doesn't sound like there's a ton of true tackles in this draft. And so what I think you're going to see is a lot of high end talent on the interior of the offensive line in terms of how they project the NFL, and that's super exciting for Seattle, because for as harsh as I've been on John Schneider with regards to the trenches, he's really done a great job at the perimeter. Seattle's skill position players and their secondary he's done a great job constructing that part of the roster. And so it's nice that in a draft where they just need beef, this is a very beef heavy draft. I love the center out of Georgia. And you'll have to forgive me for not getting all the names right now.
Oh no, dude, I'm the
They're
same
just
way.
the guy from the school. And, I'm in my process with really starting to familiarize myself, but the center out of Georgia who blew the roof off the combine, The guards from Alabama, the tackle from LSU that a lot of folks are projecting as a guard. Those guys super super attractive. There's an Iowa State guard that I really like watching his film, and he had a fantastic combine. So I'm very curious to see which of those guys are going to be there at 18 because I do hope that's the direction they go.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. Like when I look at what this team needs, I've talked about it for years. You gotta get big in both sides of the line. We saw what the Eagles did to the Chiefs in this year's Super Bowl. They just manhandled the shit out of them. They just
Yep.
were like, okay, well, we're gonna take you off. We're gonna move the line of scrimmage. We're gonna reset that line of scrimmage behind, and then we're gonna make you try and play bully ball. And the Chiefs really weren't able to match that. I will say, man, I love watching the big guys move
Yeah.
in the combine. Armand Membu, everyone's talking about this guy, just a freak of nature, man. Like you run like a 4.9 40 at 300 something pounds. Like
Well,
I
and
don't
it
know
looked
if you
so
could.
easy. It looked so
Oh,
easy when he did it.
and he's just like war cry pig, just screaming the whole way. I just loved it, you know. And Tyler Brooker, he didn't look. I didn't think he had the great combine, but his gameplay I think will show more than just the fancy underwear Olympics, as I call the draft combine. But with all that being said, man, like they need a guard. Everyone talks about it. You guys and you and Mike have talked about it nauseum. We need a guard. Like Laken Tomlinson was okay. You know, he was
Yeah.
better than a lot of guys who spent more money. There was Robert Hunt, the guard that was signed last year in Miami, was garbage compared
Yeah.
to Laken Tomlinson on PFF. But it's you gotta get big, you gotta get strong. And when Clint Kubiak came in, they were like, we want to run the football and we're going to be physical and we're going to assert ourselves on that aspect of the game itself. So it's like I look at the landscape and I'm like, well, to do that, you need to get big, you need to get nasty, and they've talked about having athletic linemen. And
Yeah.
it was talked about Gray Zabel. He's like one of the most like easy names in this draft class to remember, right? NDSU guy.
He's the North Dakota State guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people projecting him at center, and I don't know, like maybe it's. I think you'll probably understand where I'm coming from. I get like really bad Joey Hunt vibes. Not saying he's gonna be Joey Hunt, but he's like a little undersized, like he's a little smaller guy, right? But
Yeah.
with all that being said, it's you gotta get big, you gotta get tenacious, you gotta be able to set an identity because we saw what happened with Ryan Grubb last year. They want to come in and throw the football 50 times all over the field, and like they did in college with Penix and all those guys and Rome Odunze. But
Mm-hmm.
Clint Kubiak made Derek Carr look a lot better than I personally think he is. I don't think he's a dog shit quarterback by any means, but he's not Geno. I believe Geno is a step above Derek Carr, just based upon his natural ability
Yeah, I would agree.
to throw the football. And it makes me ask myself, well, if you can get a guard, let's say at 18, I doubt Membu will be there. I think he's probably going to be top 10, just based upon traits.
Right.
Nick Emanwari, holy shit, man! Like,
Dude, I know.
wow.
I know. You want to talk about draft crushes. He was my number one kind of under the radar guy, and people who really study the draft and follow college football, he's not under the radar. But I think for a lot of fans who like us are kind of starting to familiarize ourselves with some of these players, uh, he was almost so excited about it as kind of and no one's ever going to be Cam Chancellor, but a Cam Chancellor style in the box safety. And for him to show up, what was he, like 6'2", 225, and then
Yep.
His relative athletic score was not only the highest for any safety ever, it also would have been the highest for any cornerback ever and third highest for any linebacker ever. I mean, basically, he just had the most athletic combine in the world, and he feels like a perfect Mike McDonald player. But I was hoping he'd be there mid-second round, and I think that ship has sailed.
Do you think that Seattle should spend 18? If he's there at 18, do you spend him? Do you pull the trigger?
I think that if you hired Mike McDonald to bring in Mike McDonald's defense, because we didn't know anything about him as a leader, and it seems like he did a good job. In fact, when the NFLPA report cards came out, the highest grade for Seattle was head coach, and his players gave him an A. So I think he's got that. But in the same way that you hire Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan or Kevin O'Connell for their offense and then hope that they're a leader. You hired Mike Macdonald for his defense. And if Mike Macdonald says, that's my guy, yes, then I'm on board. I will make my peace with it. It's not the direction I would go outside looking in, but I would rather have an A or A plus prospect at a safety position, even if it's not the highest position of need, than like a B or B plus prospect on the offensive line, just because that's what we need to do. I do think in the first round, you take best player available.
Yeah, no, and for me, it's like you and Mike have talked about it, and I can't. The reporter from LA, the gal you had on,
Yeah, Jordan Rodriguez.
yeah, Jordan Reed, and she was talking about the best thing that you can do is take the best player available versus reach for need, which is what they did with Jermaine Ifedi, James Carpenter, right? And it's like
Yes.
you look at having blue chip quality players, and the only thing that makes me reserved about taking him at 18 is that Tyrese Knight was an animal last year. He was
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. He was like a cyclone. Everywhere
Yeah.
the ball was, he was there, right next to him and EJ. So when I think about this out loud, are you willing to take Tyrese Knight off the field if you're going to run a 2 linebacker package, or do you run a big nickel and put him on the field at the same time? Like, how would that balance?
Yeah, I think you keep Tyrese Knight on the field with Ernest Jones is probably how I think they'll play it. I think if you bring in Evan Worry or a player like that in the secondary, it makes me wonder how you shuffle the pieces with like a Reek Woolen and a Kobe Bryant. Um, because I thought Kobe Bryant played sensational, essentially in that big nickel spot, kind of hybrid safety slot corner type guy. So ultimately, like if Mike Macdonald, who I think is the best defensive mind this side of Steve Spagnuolo on the planet right now, if he says that's my guy, I'm just gonna trust that he has a plan for him. So I'm less worried about them taking Tyrese Knight off of the field and more interested in what it means for Kobe Bryant. Do they move him back to corner and move on from Reek Woolen? You know, maybe move Kobe to the slot and put Devin Witherspoon outside, or you know, what do you do there? What does it mean for a guy like Trey Brown? Does it mean you have to go sign a corner or draft a corner? It's pretty shallow free agent class this year, but I would say corner is the deepest position. So yeah, that'll be an interesting domino to follow for sure. But I think Tyrese Knight's snaps are probably pretty safe heading into 2025.
Yeah, and with you mentioning about DBs and stuff, the one position I saw them talk the most, or the two positions, it was DB and it was O line. It wasn't even close. Like they
Yeah,
talked to a lot of DBs. Funny enough, the other Kobe Bryant, that would be
yeah,
one hell of a tongue twister and make Seahawk fans go absolutely batshit crazy with having
yeah.
two guys with it the same name. But it's going to be something that we monitor, especially I believe they will draft one more linebacker just because I don't know what the future of Draymond Jones is. Draymond Jones is one of those players that you could probably add another void year, drop the money down if
He
you want to make
gone.
him one more chance. But there's
He gone.
every board, everything I'm seeing is like he's gone. Uchenna probably restructure because he has that veteran leadership within the locker room. And what the hell do you do with Jaron Reed, man? Like Jaron Reed, like him and Byron Murphy are like brothers, right? Like
Yeah,
he was in Jaron Reed's pocket the whole year, and
yeah.
Mike McDonald was very vocal about him with wanting to retain him. But I'm also like, this is a similar conversation about Tyrese Knight and bringing in another like heavy nickel and even Worry. Do you think if you were to bring back Jaron Reed, does that take more opportunity away from Byron Murphy, or would they just have a limited snap count?
Um, yeah. I'm of two minds on that. Mike McDonald was pretty open about saying he wanted to keep Jaron Reed. Jaron Reed's 33 years old, so I think he's the type of player that you can even like let test the market and then see, okay, is the best offer he's got 2 years, $8 million. Okay. Do we want to match that? Yeah, probably. Some team says, nope, he's the missing piece. Here's 3 years, 25 million. But then you let him go and you draft a defensive lineman or you get one in free agency. I think Reed is a guy that you let test the market, but that you'd like to have back if the price isn't anything crazy. And I really don't think it will be, because the other thing about defensive line that I think is easy for fans to overlook or just not be aware of is that's the position group that rotates the most. Offensive linemen play every snap if they're healthy. Most wide receivers, your top two wide receivers, are playing pretty much every snap. These are guys with snap counts at 90, 95%. Same goes for your top linebackers, your top secondary guys. It's running backs and defensive linemen that rotate out, and you just got to have the depth. So I don't want to create unnecessary holes in this roster, especially with how in flux I think the NFC West is right now. And I think Seattle's league average offensive line away from maybe winning that division. I think I don't want to take starters or rotation players off this roster if I don't have to. But I agree with you about Nwosu. I think you keep him. I don't think you have enough pass rushing chops to just move on from him as much as I like Mafe and Hall. I think Draymond's gone. I think Lockett's gone. And I think the big decision really is going to be Reek Woolen.
Yeah, I do too. It's Mike Macdonald is, it's all about integrity. Integrity and discipline are like the two things we see a lot with his style of teaching, the way he wants his players to perform on defense, and the fact that he was literally, his ass was benched to start the game for a lack of, I don't want to call it want to, but it was, it speak for itself. But when you're talking about holes in, on starting rosters, man, this offseason just starting to turn up a little bit. A couple of news came out over the combine. First of all, do you think Deebo Samuel being traded for a 5th-round pick is just based upon the fact that dude was just beat to shit? Kyle Shanahan used him like a running back and a rag doll, and they were like, well, we need to clear $18 million because reports out of Grant Cohen in San Francisco were very, very clear that they're not going to spend a large amount of money on this upcoming season after what they've done with the CMC contract and extending Fred Warner and George Kittle and all those guys. So when you look at what the Niners are doing right now with trading away Deebo Samuel for essentially, I don't know if it's a mid or a late round, it's a 5th-round pick. It doesn't really matter that much. But do you see them pointing towards a possible rebuild next season? Or is this just like, hey, we think he's just not worth the money that he's going to make, and we'll just find somebody else who can come in and play half as good as he is, or maybe give those reps to Ricky Pearsall?
Yeah, I think they're going through the same thing the Seahawks went through 2015, 2016, where the 49ers probably have more top-end talent on their roster than the other team in the NFL. And that's why they went to 4 NFC championship games and 2 Super Bowls in a 5-year stretch. And the only season they didn't was when they didn't have a quarterback. They're a little bit a victim of their own success, much like Seattle was once everybody starts coming off their rookie contracts. I mean, they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy $50-some million a year. That has to come from somewhere. The reason they only got a 5th from Deebo Samuel wasn't because Deebo is completely washed, in my opinion, although I think he's headed that way. It's because the Commanders were willing to take on his $17.5 million and clear that off of the books for the 49ers. But yeah, I mean, they just extended Bosa. You mentioned Kittle and Warner. They've got McCaffrey extended. They've got their safety. I want to call him Mustafa. And they've got really good players. Trent Williams wants more money. There's victims. They gave Ayuk a contract they never should have got him. I was actually happy that they signed him to that because I think that he just had like a one-off Will Fuller season where, I mean, the guy was averaging like 17 yards a target. It was a number we've never seen before. And so, I think they're just shackled themselves with big contracts for good players, and they've got a couple more big contracts they have to give out. So I think if I'm Deebo, I think Washington is about as good a situation as you can hope. He was probably my favorite player on the 49ers, and I like a lot of 49ers players. So I hope he does well. But, I think it's just victim of their own success. There's a lot of guys they got to sign, and it's the 29-year-old beat-up wide receiver who's on the chopping block.
Yeah, I look at the Niners, and the first thing my brain says is that you have to address the left tackle position. Trent Williams is literally on a year-to-year basis at this point, and we've seen Brock Purdy looks when they don't have a left tackle. He, ended the season with more interceptions than he did touchdowns. He struggled. They really had a hard look in the mirror. Like, well, what are we going to do with this team moving forward? So I anticipate them to draft a wide receiver just like they did with Ricky Pearsall last year. Who I love, Ricky Pearsall. That was a
Hmm.
crazy batshit story last year what happened with him.
Yeah,
Um,
he's a good player.
yeah, he is a really good player. And there's like the tackle at Texas, Banks, I think it is, whatever it is. There are some guys that'll be mentioned for them in
Well, and
mocks and
they
stuff,
got
but
Juwan Jennings too, and
yeah,
Juwan Jennings that's a ball player right there.
he gives me a very strong Jermaine Kearse like 2.0 vibe. Just clutch, very savvy. Doesn't do anything overly flashy, but he's incredibly consistent blocking. So, dude,
Yeah,
like Niners are one thing. What the hell is going on in Los Angeles?
I know. Yeah, they're in an interesting spot too. Is they've got one of the youngest rosters in the NFL, but then two of their most important players are on the downside of 30 in Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp, and it sounds like Cooper Kupp is probably headed elsewhere.
Yep.
And that's just, it's like the Deebo thing. It's kind of a move I think they got to do. Puka is probably the best draft pick from any team of the last 5 years. And, they can lead into that. I think they really like the way Tutu Atwell has come on. They like
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Whittington. Got a couple of good tight ends there. So I don't think they're super hurting, without Kupp, although it does make them worse in the short term. And then Stafford, I think they tried to do right by Stafford and say, you know what, go find out what your market is. And I think Stafford found out that his market is probably about 40 million a year.
Yeah.
And that's what the Rams are happy to, let's see how long this lasts. But I do think the Rams will be targeting a quarterback here in the next couple of years. And that's a scary thought, with Sean McVay getting his hands on a young quarterback. I mean, he could absolutely do for a guy what Shanahan has done for Purdy, and there's just weapons everywhere. So I'm going to be super interested to see what they do. I mean, it's infuriating that Aaron Donald finally retires and then they just recreate him in the aggregate with their first two picks of last year, and they're like the top two defensive rookie of the year candidates. It's insane. Les Snead, he's such a G.
He is. He is. It's like this last year's draft class just incredibly deep. Like one of the deepest draft classes I can remember in a goddamn long time, man.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
you get was it Fisher or Fish on the defensive tackle, and then just an absolute bulldozer of that defensive end, man. Like they crushed it. And they do it every year. It seems like they don't really miss on very many draft picks. I saw they extended Alaric Jackson, their left tackle.
Yep. Yeah, they had to do that.
Yeah. But dude, like I look at what happened with Stafford and all the reports about him and Brady hanging out and like Montana, Wyoming, all that
Yeah.
bullshit, I would have loved to see him with Pete. I think that would have been a really interesting idea. But my brain is more like, well, why would Stafford leave? Besides for the fact that his wife runs that entire show. Her podcast is a very polarizing
Yeah,
conversation.
I've never listened, but I get that feeling.
Yeah, no, but when we talk about Stafford, man, you can't help but look at our own situation and ask ourselves, well, when Stafford contract comes out, I agree with you, $40 million is probably the floor for Stafford. I would think the ceiling is maybe 45 and a half, 46. I don't think it goes any higher than that. But do you think that when the contract comes out for Stafford, that's going to be the groundwork for what Seahawks try and do with Geno, or Geno is he anything less, or what is a reasonable contract and idea and for your opinion?
Yeah, I said during the season, if Geno's agent said 3 years, 135 million, so that'd be 45 a year with 80 million guaranteed, I'd sign that today. I think the differences between Stafford and Geno is going to be the length of the contract, because while they're fairly similar in age, Geno is a few years younger. When it comes to mileage, it's a completely different story. Geno does not have the mileage of most 34-year-old quarterbacks who's backup for 9 years. And so I think there's more juice. I mean, Geno he hit like 22 miles an hour on a touchdown scramble last year. I mean, Stafford's never done that, right? It's a different type of quarterback, but yeah, I'm a big Geno Smith believer. And I said this to Brock this morning. For me, because I've found myself defending Geno so much to readers and listeners and people follow me on Twitter and whatnot, that I've maybe painted myself into a position where I'm saying Geno Smith is elite, and I'm not saying that, but I do think he's very good. I think he's a top 12 quarterback in the NFL, and I think people underestimate how difficult it is to replace that and to improve on that. And that is the most valuable, top 12 quarterback's the most valuable asset in American sports, and that's expensive. And I asked Brock if he saw a path to the post Geno quarterback this year, whether that's draft, free agency, trade, whatever. And he said he didn't think so. And that's how I feel also. You are in a position to go out and try and win this division right now. The opening is there. This is not, in my opinion, the time to reach for quarterback, because make no mistake, whoever you're moving on from Geno for will be a reach. I mean, Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, like, yeah, sure, maybe you free up some money, but if your quarterback stinks, it's not really going to matter. And sure, take a shot if you like Tyler Shuck in the 4th round, if he makes it that far, something like that. But don't reach for someone that has a very, very small chance of being better than Geno this year. And then next year, when it's supposedly a much deeper draft class, now you've got Geno under contract for another year or two, and you can draft that guy, and he can sit and, learn. And I do think that's going to be the future model for NFL teams, is to draft a quarterback and sit him for a year. That's how it used to be. And we've just seen so many high-profile flameouts from rookie quarterbacks that I'm on board. I think it's the way to go.
Yeah, it's like I look at Geno, Greg Bell, they mentioned this on 710. The number for me that I start getting nervous about, anything, if it's 42 million, I'm good. If it's 45 million, I start getting nervous. I do. It's nothing against Geno. Geno is like
it's going to be 45 million.
Yeah, you think so?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
But so I'm with you. You start getting too much higher than that, and I start to get nervous. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I think it's going to be 45.
Do you think it'll be like a Tua kind of contract, Tua, Trevor Lawrence kind of S deal? Maybe not so much the length, but about the AAV.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is Geno ask for that, and I think Seattle's going to start with where Geno's at currently, in that $28 to $35 million range, and Geno's going to start with the Tua, Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love type contracts, and they're going to meet in the middle. And that middle will be low to mid 40s. Really, it's going to come down to the guaranteed money. The per annum dollars, that's the stuff you can move around. I mean, you can move around guaranteed money too, but the thing that I always encourage fans to keep in mind is the cap goes up 8 to 10% every year. And when the cap is $280 million, well, you're talking about $25 to $28 million a year in extra cap. And that goes up for every team. That's why when DK Metcalf signed his contract and he was like the 5th highest paid receiver in the NFL, and everyone's like, he's not a top 5 wide receiver. Well, yeah, I agree with you. But by the time he gets to the end of his contract, he's going to be like the 25th highest paid wide receiver. And that's a value. And so I really encourage people not to get too hung up on what the number is in year one, but more what is the average percentage of the cap space over the course of the contract. And something in the 40s for Geno over 2 to 3 years, I think is manageable. I think it leaves you enough room to still extend DK and extend some of your draft hits like Mafe and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Devin Witherspoon down the line, which makes me think that Reek might be gone.
So I know that you have been very vocal about this, so I'm still going to ask you because it intrigues my brain. You have been keeping on the keep DK train. You're like, dude, if you get rid of this guy, it's a massive mistake. Like, the guy separates, he forces a second defensive player to account for him at all times, which allows for underneath routes for like JSN, Noah Fant, AJ Barner, who I think is going to be a freaking stud, man. I think AJ Barner is going to be sneaky good. I think he could be like a Luke Wilson kind of esque like value on this team. Not to like make a
Mhm.
Seahawk comparison, but I can't help but like just ask myself, like with all the stuff right about DK this and DK that and Myles Garrett, would you rather allocate the money to DK Metcalf or would you rather allocate that money to Myles Garrett?
Well, I mean, if it's one for one, Miles Garrett, 100 times out of 100. I mean, Miles Garrett's the best defensive player on planet Earth.
Right.
If it's one or the other, great. But if it's you're losing DK, whether you're trading him to get Garrett or you're you know letting his contract expire after the year or whatever, it's also going to be a first rounder or two first rounders, and then you're giving that money to Myles Garrett. If it was the same and they're both free agents and they both say, "Hey, I want to play for my market value for the Seahawks," and the Seahawks say we can only afford one of them, yeah, Myles Garrett, absolutely, it's Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not one for one. It's you're losing DK and you're losing first round picks in order to then give DK money to Myles Garrett. And it's probably going to be more than DK money to get a 30-year-old Myles Garrett. And when the cliff comes, it does come fast. So yeah, I have yet to see a plausible Garrett DK trade that I would be in favor of. And I just don't think with where this team's where they're still a fairly young roster, but also primed to compete while they still have some of their best players on rookie contracts. I don't think creating a hole at the most athletic player in your roster is a wise move. He's 27 years old. I mean, the great receivers, the very good receivers, their prime is through year 29. Sign this dude through his age 30 season. Um, is how I would approach it. I don't love this rumor deal with the Packers, pick 23
Oh no.
plus one of their receivers. If you're going to trade DK, you need to feel very confident that you're going to get the same impact in your return, and it needs to be immediate. And I just don't see that out there.
No, I agree, man. Like Romeo Dobbs in 23 does not get me anywhere for a DK Metcalf. Romeo Dobbs has a history of concussions. That is a noticeable, obviously, in the league, in the world that we play in the NFL. It's a big deal. But and yeah, it's always tantalizing to have two first round picks. But I agree with you because with Lockett essentially being out the door, like it's
Mhm.
all but done. There's no way that he returns. I don't think there's any because if he wants to take a lesser deal for the amount of pain and punishment he's put on that body in his career, it's just this is the time to walk out and embrace your career and your accomplishments and move forward with it. But and because a lot of people have been asking me, well, what do you feel about this conversation? Which is why I brought it up. I agree with you that trading DK in this current year makes no sense. There isn't a Brian Thomas Jr. that would come in and make a
Right.
similar a contribution on this team, and you can't afford to make this position as young as it would be. At that point, it would be what JSN and Jake Bobo. Like
Yeah.
that's I mean, no, dude, don't do disrespect to Jake Bobo.
Well, and
Jake
you're
Bobo is a great
you're
special teams
almost
player.
you're painting yourself into a corner almost where you would then have to use that late first. Because here's the thing: a bad team is not going to trade for DK Metcalf. They're not going to trade their first for DK Metcalf. So a team that's making that move for a 27-year-old freak athlete wide receiver is a team that's trying to get over the top. That means that pick's in the 20s. And it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to forget how low the hit rate is in the back half of the first round. It's below 50% that those dudes ever make a Pro Bowl, and well below and in the back half of the first round. And so you're almost painting yourself into a corner that you then have to draft a wide receiver there. Ted McMillan's not going to be there at 23. So now you're like hoping Emeka Ibuka or Matthew Golden or Luther Burden can approximate DK Metcalf's value or at least come close enough to justify the cap savings. But we have fallen too in love with cap space. The purpose of cap space is to spend it on good players. You have a good player, spend it on him.
Well, yeah, I mean, for recency bias, when DK Metcalf was in that draft class, everyone was like, "What is he gonna do? Just go run a go ball, a go
Mm-hmm.
route? Like that's all he thought he could do." And now he's is what he has become. And now the league's like, "Oh well, shit, DK Metcalf is in his last year of his deal, blah 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 blah." I don't want Treylon Burks, Tennessee for AJ Brown trade. I'm not about that,
Yeah.
because then you're asking, like you said, the hit rate on those guys is so incredibly low, man. You can't consistently hit on guys like that over and over again. So the last thing, man, I'm gonna bring up for today, and again, huge thank you and appreciation for taking time out of your busy afternoon. Looks like you're out on the golf course. It looks beautiful. I hope you're. Hey, I know you hit that 73, whatever it was the other day. That shit was impressive.
Thank you. That came out of nowhere. That was so much better than any round I've ever played before. So I just got lucky. No, I'm not playing today, but I was at the office right up until this interview, and the conference room was being used. So I was like, I'm gonna go to my happy place. So I'm in the gazebo off the 18th green, where I bring my laptop to work a couple times a week, and watch folks come in and have a little cigar while I work. So yeah, I'm definitely in my happy place right now, and very happy to be here with you.
Thanks, man. And I'm jealous. I've never played golf my entire life. I am like an uncoordinated giraffe. So I would be one hell of an
Don't
interesting
start.
thing.
It's like doing heroin once. Like,
Oh God.
don't do
It's
it,
that
because
addicting, huh?
you're gonna get hooked. That's all I think about, man. I like fall asleep going through my sleep. It's terrible, man. Don't do it.
So we've talked about the draft crushes. We've talked about the offseason moves. We talked a little bit about Geno. I can't help but ask, if there was a quarterback in this draft class that you said to yourself, Jacson, like, I would be okay if the Seahawks, I almost said Mariners because I would just got back from Arizona last week.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. And I look at two guys, man. I look at Jackson Dart and Tyler Shuck. It's just, that's a tough name for me. But
Well, it's because it's not how it's spelled.
no.
So
No.
I get it. Trust me, no one gets my name right either. I totally understand.
So, but is there any, like, is there a quarterback that you would be 100? I would say not 100, but you would be 75% okay with him drafting in this class. I know the class is Sanders is dropping like a bad habit. Cam Ward is probably going to go to the Giants because the Giants are in absolute quarterback purgatory, just like the Bears were prior to Caleb Williams. But is there anybody that you would look at and say, yeah, I'd be okay with him rolling the ball, like you said, a 4th-round pick, a 5th-round pick? Howard from Ohio State, his call might have looked fucking awful.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm not a Will Howard guy. No, you said the two. I don't think Jackson Dart's the one guy where, if they felt that, if he was there at 50, because I think even that's going to stretch it. This just happens with quarterbacks in the modern NFL. They just get steamed up. Will Levis had no business going at the top of the 2nd round, and even he was getting, 1st round buzz. It's I think Dart is going to get steamed up, but if he was there at 50, I would probably be all right with that. And then, if Shuck is there in the 4th or 5th round, sure, I don't give a shit. I don't care what you do with your 4th and 5th round picks. Have like an 8% hit rate. Like,
right.
sure, take your shot at the quarterback. Chuck doesn't impress me a ton, but I think there's enough tools there that there's a chance maybe you sit him or whatever. But I don't think drafting Tyler Shuck like makes you say, okay, we're set at quarterback. I think Jackson Dart could. The problem is, I think he's got all the tools. I think his throw, I thought he was the best thrower in the drills at the combine. His numbers are crazy. It's just tough when you see offense like what Ole Miss ran, because that's not anything like an NFL offense. When you see that
No.
crazy spread, offense where the splits are so wide and the athleticism gap between receivers and defensive backs is so large, the numbers get crazy. And so you don't know if that guy is Patrick Mahomes or if he's Hendon Hooker. And that being said, I just think Dart has done enough at a young enough age that I would throw the dart at Jackson and get him in the 2nd round if he was there. I think I could talk myself into that one pretty easily.
I feel the same way. I look at Jackson Dart and I just see Bo Nix. And I'll be honest, I talk a lot of shit about Bo Nix, man. I
I
didn't
did
like Bo
too.
Nix at all. I looked at him and he thought he looked like a lesser version of Alex Smith, and Alex Smith had a respectable career up until he shattered his leg. Um, but I look at what this team and you said this on your show, man, and it's something I kind of I've taken and really adopted to my way of viewing. I am a football fan first and a
Mm-hmm.
Seahawks fan second. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
and looking at a 30,000-foot perspective, Gino is going to be Gino up until what he cannot be Gino anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having somebody who can be in the reins, who can be in there, like being a mentor, and Sam Howell, sorry, I don't know if it was just bad timing. I don't know if he put on his shoes the backwards the wrong way or whatever the hell happened to him last year,
Yeah.
man. But he looked awful. He looked like gun shy, which is weird. It wasn't the same quarterback we saw when he came into our field and kicked our ass.
No, I know. I think the team was pretty disappointed with that. You know, we had a couple members of the Seahawks beat on Cigar Thoughts recently, Brady Henderson and Michael Sean Dugar, and these guys are at every practice, and they're just like, this is not a conversation, like at all. Sam Howell is not that guy, and I didn't mind the trade for him. Because he had shown such flashes at in Washington, and going into his last year at North Carolina, there was talk about him being the number one overall pick. The top two quarterbacks in college football were going to be Sam Howell and Spencer Rattler. And sometimes things just don't shake out the way that you think they're going to. And so Sam Howell is not the guy.
No, it's and like I say, it's been like a fifth round pick. It is what it is. It's not like a big deal, but
Right.
it's gonna be something we're definitely monitor, man. When we get closer to the draft and we start getting the Daniel Jeremiah's, the Todd McShay's, obviously the Mel Kiper and his godfathers of 50 years of draft knowledge. I'm really a big DJ fan. I think he does the best job in the business without a question. The amount of hours he puts in, I mean, they all do, but Daniel Jeremiah does a great job. So be keeping an eye on that, Jacson. Brother, please tell the people where they can find and hear more about you, man.
Yeah, well, first of all, again, thank you for having me. It's very clear you know your shit, Dakota. I'm glad you're doing the show, man. This is really cool. So I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky at Jacson Bevens, like I always say at the end of the show. My name is Jacson. Remember that no K is okay when you spell my name. And then, my show is Cigar Thoughts. You can find me on all social media at Cigar Thoughts or Cigar Thoughts NFL. But the big one is just YouTube. Our show's there every week, and of course we're everywhere you get your podcasts.
Awesome, man. Hey, I can't wait to tune in about Brock Heward. Brock's like my meat smoking, left-handed, idol. I look at the dude and he just does a great job, and I look forward to hearing to that conversation.
He's such a pro, man. He's one of the guys where honestly, this is the second time we've had him on. The first time I was a little nervous because he does really know his shit, and he's lived it. And so we had a really great conversation about the combine with someone who went through it 26 years ago, and talking about just what a mind fuck going through the combine as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old is. So great episode. It should post either tonight or tomorrow, and y'all should definitely check that one out.
Oh, I can't wait for it, man. Hey, I would love to do this again. If whenever you got time, brother, you want to do closer to the draft, I would love to rekindle this up and do a volume 2.0. That'd be great.
Hey, that sounds great, Dakota. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Jacson.
All right, cheers, man.
See ya.